You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think so around these parts, Options Insider Radio Network. Remember, it's available on a wide variety of outlets and a wide variety of formats. If you want to, of course, listen on demand, it's available on just about every platform under the sun. And of course, if you want to join us live for this show, everything else we do throughout the week, including the exclusive shows like the Pro Q&A sessions and indeed Options Oddities, coming up a little bit later today. I think we'll be talking about a little bit about Hood and a few other things that are popping up on the radar. Then, of course, you have to join the Secret Club. TheOptionsinsider.com/Secret Club is the place to go to learn more about all that fun. Of course, however you listen live after the fact, we do love to hear from all of you folks, so keep sending in those questions, those comments, those pearls of wisdom. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. And let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. First, let's go back out to the southern volatility mecca known as Austin, where we are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark SEBASTIAN from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, welcome back to the program, sir. And not a lot to talk about this week. Should be a short show, right?
It is great to be here. I am so excited to be on the show today. Lots to discuss, lots going on, lots in the market. So we've got a plenty packed in for you folks that you're going to want to hear.
A jam-packed show indeed, beset by technical problems. So let's see if we can work all of this out there today. Because I do believe if the technology gods are smiling upon us, we are joined once again. It's been quite some time. In fact, the first time here for the new year of 2022 by none other than the Flowmaster himself, Mr. Henry Schwartz from Trade Alert. Mr. Flowmaster, are you there, sir? Can you hear me?
I am here, Mark. Can you hear me?
There he is. Yes. Mr. Flowmaster, glad you could join us, sir. In honor of you, sir, we have compiled a mostly Trade Alert driven volatility views today. So does that make you excited, make you happy?
I appreciate it. And I appreciate that you got VIX up around 30 just so that we could have an interesting show.
Just for you we did that, sir. All right. The gang is all assembled. Let's dive right on into the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the week that was, and indeed still is, from vol trading and trending and unusual activity and all sorts of perspectives. And we have a lot to unpack. We're going to get to all that in a second. Trust me, listeners. But first, like I mentioned, it's the first time that we've been joined by the Flow Master in quite some time here on Volatility Views. And also, it is his first appearance here for the new year. So, Mr. Flow Master, really quickly, before we dive into this week's madness, catch us up. You obviously crunch all the numbers. You're always looking at all the data throughout the year over there at Trade Alert. So give us your thoughts, your highlights, your lowlights. What stands out for you from a vol perspective in the insane year that was 2021, sir?
Yes, things are. I mean, we're finishing. We're coming off of an insane year, almost 10 billion contracts in volume. I'm completing a nice kind of deck that runs through all that, and then we had a couple quiet days at the beginning of January, and then the fireworks started, and it's been kind of an amazing year, 2022, and we're only about 1/12 of the way through it, right? So, I mean, I'm busier than ever tracking the flow, which is my first love, and then also kind of doing some amazing integration of the Trade Alert technology with the SIBO technology and Hanwick and FT options and Live All Pro, and it really is an amazing kind of combination of smart people and really great platforms and data, and that's keeping us really busy.
Very busy indeed. You picked a good one to come back on, Mr. Flowmaster. We got some stuff to talk about. As we're kicking off the show here, let's set the table, listeners. Yeah, we might have to crank out the logins again. We had a fun time with that. Censors and copyright law be damned last week on the show. Hopefully you guys liked that. You got a whole half an hour of the logins in your ear holes. Maybe we'll spare you this week, but we could definitely crank it up again because we are back north of 30, listeners. In most of the major vol products. Spikes at about a 30.25 coming into showtime. That puts it up a little over 3, about 3.2 handles from this time last week. VIX cash also at about 30.25. So a rare moment of symmetry out there between the two. That's up about 3.5 points from this time last week. Of course, that only begins to tell the story of this week. Of course, last week on the show, we had the once in future and now present Dr. VIX, and it was a little bit of a skittish sell-off time. Everyone was looking into the weekend with a little bit of trepidation, concerned, of course, about the Fed coming up this week, but also about perhaps a shooting war might pop off at any moment over there with the border of Ukraine. So there are a lot of things on the radar over the weekend, and we said if anything developed in the Ukrainian front, we probably would come in pretty hard to the downside, and VIX would probably be in the 30s on Monday. And lo and behold, we saw that very aggressively. Of course, came in down off almost 4.25%, and the NASDAQ at one point, 1,000 points in the Dow. It was an obliteration. And then as we started our option block program, the worms started to turn. And I don't think any of us called a unched to up by the end of the day, but that's pretty much what we saw. VIX got into the 38, threatening a 40 handle. Never quite got there, but got pretty darn close. And then, of course, we saw a similar pattern play out on Tuesday. Not quite to the same degree, off about 2+% in most of the major indices before we reverted it. Yesterday, we saw a flipping of the script. We saw a rally and then got the legs cut out from under it over there to end the day and spend most of the day really on the red side. And then today, after a mixed bag of earnings, some good, some pretty terrible, like Robinhood and a few other things coming out this week. But Apple looking pretty good, and that usually tends to lift a lot of boats out there. So most of the major indices coming into today feeling their oats again. Dow up about 0.5%, S&P up about 1.1%, and the NASDAQ up about 1.7%. Of course, our old friend VVIX, a.k.a. the Vol of Vol, looking pretty frothy, down a little bit from where it was this time last week, but only down about 7 points, still at about 135 when we kicked off the show. Our friend the Viking, a.k.a. the V-Spikes, the Vol of Spikes, looking frothy at about a 180.5. That's up about almost 10 points from this time last week. We flirted with it. We almost hit it. Didn't quite get there, but we almost hit the high for the Viking, which was set back on December 3rd, almost 206. We got to about 204.5 almost on Monday. So almost got there for a new high for the V-Spikes, but not quite yet. So still looking frothy out there. Mr. Meatball, a lot to unpack from this week. Walk us through. Let's start on Monday because it was such an unprecedented day in many aspects. We come in, we're down 4+% in the NASDAQ, 1,000 points in the Dow. Walk us through what you're thinking there. And then as we see this magical reversal happen, walk us through all of that. And then, of course, the subsequent vol shocks we saw throughout the rest of the week into today, sir.
Yeah, I mean, we continue to see just these wild ranges. Every day, it feels like the ranges actually shrink a little bit. Monday we had a 200+ point range. By the way, that's not healthy, folks. Then we had another big range on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's been interesting. When we open down, we shoot higher by the end of the day. And when we open up, they cream it. Today, we opened down 30. And we're currently up 50. I'm interested to see whether they try and ramp it in the close and make a run over 4,400. Monday was just absolutely nuts. We went from peak panic to meh by the end of the day. And if you weren't staring at the markets and you just looked at the close, you'd had no idea that it was the fireworks that went on that Monday and the explosion in VIX. It somehow managed to close below 30, which was just absolutely astounding.
Astounding is a good adjective to describe this week. Mr. Flowmaster, same question for you. Walk us through this. You've obviously been crunching these numbers for a long time, parsing the data. What were you thinking as we saw all this madness unfolding on Monday? And then, of course, all the subsequent shocks and bounces and reversals that we've seen throughout the week.
Well, there's a guy of the 3 or 4 people that come into the office here in New York. I'm one of them. And I turned to him and I was like, man, are you seeing this? Because we were down 1,000 and then we were flat. And he said, man, if the market's going to be like this, I'm just going to spend all my time betting on sports. And I was kind of like, yeah, I understand that because it seems completely irrational. And we were joking when we were down 1,000 points that second day or about almost there that we'd be up on the day. And then 2 hours later we were. And you start to look at the market, you're like, okay. So if we have a nice big bounce and we're up 1.5%, does that mean we're going to be flat on the day or down on the day? Because it's a good illustration of how volatility clusters, right? We know volatility is mean reverting, but we also know that periods of high volatility kind of stick together, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, the other thing that's kind of amazing is you look at some of these days. If you're trading intraday, and we are swinging 1%. From down 1% to up 1%, and then the day's finishing like near flat, then you have to be very careful because the close to close realized volatility is not going to look very high, right? You're going to be like, it's actually kind of, for somebody that just kind of looks at closing prices, they'll be like, what's the big deal? Like how did VIX get up to 30? And, like today's a good example. I mean, we're up 1.5%. VIX is still basically sticking around 30 because it is a period of elevated vol because people are nervous about all of these geopolitical and everything else. So it's one of those remarkable times where the market can do anything and it probably will do anything, and you need to kind of prepare for that when you're trading because I think it's great you guys were doing a show kind of right in the thick of it all last week because it was out of hand, and really everybody kind of that's active today, they know, okay, fine, we're up 300 points, we could be down 300 by the close, that wouldn't even surprise me. So it's fun times, that's for sure.
Like I said, you've been doing this for a little bit now on the data side, on the market making side. Can you recall off the top of your head another period that you were active in where we saw such aggressive intraday swings as this week, sir?
Not in a while. I actually was going, because the VIX option volume kind of got towards 2 million last week for the first time in a while, right? And I was digging back through older data because it's been a while since we've seen a nice spike in volume like that. There's nothing quite comes to mind where we'd have these kinds of swings, but you do have to. There are plenty of examples. I saw some headlines saying it was the biggest sell-off in the Dow in history, but in percentage terms, that it was not really that big a deal. But we've been here before. We really have. It's just that you have, I think, a lot of people got used to our nice 2-year bull market, from 2020. And now all of a sudden, at the middle of January, things started to stall out, and you started hearing a lot more kind of dire predictions about, revaluations and stuff. And then we started to see that. I mean, I was talking to a couple traders, and I was like, there's no panic, right? The VIX rose, but we didn't really have any dislocations. We didn't have any limit down situations. Even when we were down 1,000, we were looking for the panic, because the panic, as that's kind of the opportunity that traders look for, because that's when prices don't matter anymore, and people, some stupid trades go up, and that can be incredibly profitable time if you're able to stay kind of rational. And we didn't see it, and then we basically bounced off of it. And I think part of the reason we're seeing the higher volatility is all the news and potential news headlines, and the liquidity. I think in this current landscape where liquidity is really controlled by a handful of big liquidity providers, it's very easy for everybody to back off, and all of a sudden, I'm not saying it's the option prices get terrible, but I think things get very thin from the underlying level to the option level. So things will move, further than you would expect.
Yeah, Monday, kind of the definition of a fast market in many regards out there. But you're right, we did see some impressive VIX volume numbers we were talking about on the option block when we kicked off that show. VIX options already at about 1.4 million. I can't recall the last time it hit that level that quickly, but that's how much paper we were seeing flying fast and furious. We'll get to more VIX volume numbers in a second over here. Of course, January has been an impressive / scary month for the last couple of years now. People always think back to March of 2020. They forget about January of 2020. We were, of course, seeing the first inklings of what would become the pandemic then, but also we had the assassination of the Iranian general. A number of other things were popping off in January of 2020. Of course, last year, January 2021 was unprecedented in many ways. We saw the birth of the meme madness. We saw a literal insurrection in DC. So January is kind of that month you kind of have to, where angels fear to tread kind of month. In fact, that was the apex for vol last year. The VIX hit about a 37, I believe, towards the end of January. It never really got to that level again. Of course, we're hanging out there now yet again, 37, 38. So maybe January will repeat itself this year, but intriguing stuff out there. Let's get on out, since we're talking about numbers on the VIX side. Let's get out to the VIX futures. When we kicked off the show, no surprise, that front portion of the curve still kind of juicy, still kind of frothy. The Feb contract, when we kicked off the show, up almost exactly 3 points, about 2.9 points, and the March contract up about 2.5. Mr. Meatball, I know you've been watching the VIX futures curve for a while, seeing how backward things get out there. Anything catching your eye out there in the land of VIX futures this week, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big piece that's kind of interesting is that we've seen, the VIX hold above 30, make runs at going higher. And really since Monday was the peak for the VIX curve. We've seen the VIX curve kind of flatten up or drop a little bit every day since Monday's peak. The Fed future peaked out at, call it 29.25 on Monday, and now sits below 28 as we're discussing. So it's been a slow flattening of the curve. We're still in backwardation, but a lot less than we were on Monday. Futures maybe starting to get a little tired here. I don't know if we've talked about this concept of volatility exhaustion, but the market can only handle so many wild swings of going nowhere before it finally just says, well, maybe we're just a little too hot in vol, and things start to ease off. VIX futures starting to point toward that a little bit.
Volatility exhaustion. You're right. We are seeing that because we are seeing subsequent shocks after Monday, and all the responses from a vol perspective getting a little bit more muted. Recency bias in the market. Been there, done that. Once you see a 4+% sell-off on the first day of the week, it takes a lot to shock your system the rest of the week. Let's get on out now to the land of the vol options. Let's start in the land of spikes. We were just saying, where's our four-way guy? Where's our 500-lot four-way guy? His contract's expired in January. When's he going to put it back on? Looks like he came back and put it on earlier this week. I believe it was Monday. A good day to be putting on some spreads out there. Kind of a similar trade out there. Looks like they sold the Feb 26-22 put spread 500 times to finance the 30-40 vertical. Looks like they actually collected about 20 cents to do that out there. So our four-way friend is back. You like that one, listeners? 26-22 versus the 30-40 vertical out there right now. In the past, we would see him doing it the other way, probably looking to sell the call spread to finance the put spread. These days, not so much. Everybody wants to get themselves a little bit of upside. And that is the case here in spikes. 30-40, will that pay off? I guess we'll find out. Let's keep on rolling out there into the land of VIX options. And that concept Mr. Meatball was just talking about, vol exhaustion, might be playing out a little bit out here in the VIX options as well. We saw obviously a very robust start to the week, and then today, not so much. Obviously, we're in the green in most of the major indices as well. So vol coming off a little bit as well. That doesn't always translate into the most robust of days either. You know, you've been around for a while listening to the show. You know, it's the sell-off days when vol is popping that the numbers really start exploding. So far, as of a few minutes ago, a little north of 250,000 contracts on the tape in VIX land right now, about 266,000. That ADV, though, we've been talking about that for a while. Remember, it got up to about 730, and then it came crashing right back down. We said, given this activity last couple of weeks, it's probably going to be popping up again, and that's exactly what we saw. That ADV is back up, threatening 600K, about 589,000 right now. It's up 154,000 contract listeners from this time last week. That's nothing to sneeze at. Let's break down some of the top positions right now. What are the size open positions in VIX options land? Then we'll get into, of course, the action from this week. By the way, it costs you about 130,000 contracts to get into the top 10 right now. And also that top 10, pretty heavily biased back towards the puts, 80-20 puts over calls. So maybe a lot of folks coming back in to fade some of this above 30 level here we're seeing in vol. They're not buying into the logins, listeners. Number 10 here. So 130,000 contracts for the Feb 70s. The first of only two calls. And that's why I love VIX, because you're not going to get a Feb 25 or even a Feb 30. It's a Feb 70s. I love it. All right, number 9, 131,000 of the June 19 puts. Number 8, 139,000 of the Feb 22 puts. Number 7, our second and final call here in the top 10, the Feb 50s, 146,000 of those. So if the Feb 70s a little bit too optimistic, a little bit too out there for your blood, I humbly suggest the Feb 50s for you. Take a look. Number 6, 146,000 of the June 18 puts. And that's it for June. The rest is all Feb listeners. Number 5, 161,000 of the Feb 21 puts. Number 4, 168,000 of the Feb 19 puts. Number 3, 168,000 of the Feb 17 puts. Number 2, 223,000 of the Feb 18 puts. And rounding out the number 1 spot this week with a decent size, maybe a little bit more than a 22, 38 caliber, shall we say, bullet out there. The Feb 20 puts 279,000 contracts out there. Let's get out to the most active. Like I said, not a lot lighting it up today. Only 266,000 contracts on the tape. Looks like the most active prints out there today are the Feb 35 calls with 20,000, followed by the Feb 22 puts with 20,000, 13,000 of the I keep saying Feb. May. This is all May, listeners. The May 27 puts, 13,000 of those. Number 4, 13,000 of the May 27 calls. And rounding out the top 5 today, only one Feb in the top 5 today, 10,000 of the Feb 26s. So a bunch of May. Interesting May. Maybe a 27-35 versus a 22-27 put spread. Intriguing stuff. The ratios are a little bit off, but the fact that it's all May all the time, kind of intriguing. I'm sure the Flow Master will have some things to say about that. Thursday, 486,000 contracts on the tape, so a little bit more active. The most active contract on Thursday, about 45,000 of the Feb 21 puts, followed by 37,000 of the Feb 19 puts, 36,000 for number 3 of the Feb 18 puts. Number 4, about 28,000 of the Feb 30s, our first call there in the top 5. And number 5 on Thursday, the Feb 20 puts, 22,000 of those. Wednesday, even more paper, 767,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog on Wednesday, 101,000. So we're getting into the six figures now, listeners. 101,000 of the Feb 20 puts, followed by 72,000 of the Feb 22 puts, 67,000 for number 3 of the Feb 18 puts. Number 4, the Feb 19 puts, 43,000. And number 5 here, 42,000 of the Feb 21 puts. Tuesday, any other week, this would have been the big dog, listeners. 1.22, almost 1.25 million contracts on the tape. The big dog, 84,000 of the Feb 20 puts, followed by number 2, about 74,000 of the March 60s. And then number 3, 73,000 as well of the March 70s. Do I smell some vertical action out there? Number 4, 61,000 of the Feb 22 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on a very busy Tuesday, 50,000 of the Feb 50s. Back to those optimistic Feb strikes. And let's get to the big dog. The reason you're here, listeners, today is Monday. Almost 2 million. This is some of the most robust paper we've seen in some time in VIX land. 1.88 million contracts on the tape, to be precise. The big dog on an absolutely insane Monday. 129,000 of the Feb 22 puts, followed by number 2, 120,000 of the Feb 20 puts. Number 3, 84,000 of the March 37 halves. Number 4, might be my favorite. This might be my trade of the week here. Number 4, 83,000 of the Feb 110 calls. Number 5, we got the 70,000 of the Feb 19 puts. Man, there's some good ones in there. Mr. Flowmaster, like I said, you picked a good week to join us here, sir. A ton of paper hitting the tape this week in VIX options. Let's start with that mad, insane explosion of volume that was Monday. Then we'll go from there, sir. What was catching your eye this week?
Well, Friday was the busiest total option volume day in history, 62.5 million contracts almost. And then Monday was the second busiest, just under 62 million. So we'd never really been through anything like that. And, VIX participated in that, as did SPX. And in fact, we've talked about how single stock options kind of stole the thunder, over the last year and a half, right? When we get moves like this, that single stock option volume dries up and everybody goes into the index and the ETFs. So, and that was exactly what we saw. We saw actually, relatively light stock option volume both days, and the index and the ETFs is where the fireworks were. I
was, Henry, my eyes absolutely exploded when I saw end of day volume on Friday. People were talking about the fact that SPY had done almost 11 million contracts. And then I looked, and SPX did just under 2.5 million. That's the equivalent of 25 million contracts in SPY when you look at the multiplier there. That was just absolutely bananas to me.
Yeah, exactly. And, and it's as we always see, tons of spreads, tons of ratio spreads. I was looking at before we got this giant vol spike, last Friday, the 21st, we had this huge put spread in VIX, like 125,000 times a three-way, where the initiator bought June 19 puts around $1.16 and then sold 125,000 each of the 16 and the 18 puts in June, all opening. A massive trade, which, it's funny, these ratio spreads or these, like a kind of a Christmas tree like this, where you're buying something and you're selling a couple other things. You look at them and you're like, oh, well, they're long the 19 puts down to 18, so they must be looking for the vol to kind of to get crushed. But that's not usually how, that may be how it is if you kind of fast forward to expiration. But the way that the marks work, right? The 2 on a ratio usually kind of explodes when you're on your way to what you want to happening. So that was kind of, that was, like I said, that was on the 21st, before we got into the 30 handle on VIX. We saw plenty of 1x2s on the call side too, which is, people, that is a way, because you get that upside, skew in VIX. Those 1x2s can get, can be bought relatively, low price, right? Because you're getting a premium on the farther out of the money. And we saw those going off 10 by 20,000 at a clip, multiple times a day. So that was kind of the meat of everything. But it was, it's always interesting, right? When you flip into backwardation and then all of a sudden you start, getting a lot of commentary about, okay, this changes the whole paradigm. Now we're in a situation where the market's telling us something different. So lots of positioning, lots of adjusting using spreads. and a few amazing days, and now maybe things are starting to cool off. But as you said at the beginning, it depends a lot on headlines out of Ukraine and everything else that's going on.
Yes, a lot to unpack there, Mr. Meatball. Same question for you, sir. Walk us through the explosion of paper that was going up this week. And I think all of our listeners want to know, how many of these Feb 110s did you buy on Monday, sir?
We saw a huge those March 110s were absolutely bananas. And then we saw the April 50s go up, the April 60s. That way upside, they were coming for it this week, along with a ton of puts. I was noticing that on Wednesday, even as the market was, still really selling off, the top 12 trades were all puts. So we're seeing traders start to try and position themselves for a fade. But the Feb 22s have been pretty heavily traded over the last few days. And but there is all that way out of the money stuff that's likely for margining, but also just makes you go, geez, could we get there, and how quickly? That's on top of the 80s and 90s and 70s that traded last week.
And you didn't answer my question, sir. How many of those Feb 110s did you buy? I know you got a few.
All of them.
All of them? I thought so.
That was all me.
80,000 for.
Well, what you don't see is that I've got a huge offer on the 150s to turn it into a spread.
Hey. Days like Monday, why not? Why wouldn't you buy the 110s? 82,000 times. Let's keep on rolling out there into the land of products you folks love to see fade. Not so much this week, listeners. Not surprising. VXX will start there. At about when we kicked off the show, about 2380. That's up about exactly 2 points from where it was this time last week. I think it has continued to tick up a little bit over the course of the show. I think we're at about a 24 or so right now. Yeah, a little bit north of the 24 handle. So up about 2.3 points from this time last week. Now, yet another week where we're seeing the tail wagging the dog a little bit. VXX doing more paper right now than VIX options. We've seen this a few times, and we're seeing it yet again. 289,000 contracts on the tape for VXX. That ADV also surging as well. 326,000 contracts now. It's up 62,000 from this time last week. Let's get out to the top positions. By the way, for VXX and for UVXY, both of these have effectively flipped. Last week, it was 70-30, all calls all the time. This week, 70-30 puts over calls now. So read into that what you will, but we are seeing a flipping of the script in the top 10s in both VXX and UVXY by now. Maybe that's getting back to some of that exhaustion. They think maybe the near-term pop is over, but we shall see. Get out there now. Number 10, cost you about 17,000 contracts, 16,950 to be precise, to break into the top 10 in VXX. That gets you to the Jan expiring today, the 28th. 20 puts. Number 9, about 17,000 of the Feb 16 puts. Number 8, the first of 3 calls, 18,000 almost of the Feb 60s. Again, that crazy upside, very popular out there in VXX and UVXY. Number 7, 18,000 as well of the Feb 18 puts. Number 6, 18, almost 19,000 of the Feb expiring next week 18 puts, so on the 4th. Number 5, 22,000 of the Jan 32s, again going the way of the dodo today. Number 4, 27,000 of the Feb 20 puts. Number 3, 29,500 of the Feb expiring on the 4th. So once again in the weeklies, 24 calls. That's our third and final call in the top 10 this week, listeners. Number 2, 37,000 of the Feb 19 puts. And number 1 with a decent-sized bullet out there, 65,200 of the Feb 17 puts. In terms of that, a pretty active day out there, that nearly 300,000 contract. Let's see what's lighting it up out there today. And it's the Jan 24 puts going away today, 22,000 of those bad boys, followed by the 25 calls with about 18,000. Again, we're kind of flirting between the 24 and 25 strike, closer to the 24 right now, but still not surprising to see those two lighting it up. Number 3, we go out to March. The March 18 half put, 16,000 of those. Also seeing 16,000 of number 4 of the March 17 puts, and rounding out the top 5, a bit of a March trifecta here, 14,000 of the March 17 half puts. Mr. Meatball, I know you and a lot of your crazies out there in the pitch chat like to watch yourself some VXX, not perhaps getting the erosion that you wanted this week, but also yet another day where we're seeing VXX doing more paper than VIX, sir. What was catching your eye out there in VXX land this week?
Yeah, when we get into Expiration Friday, you see a lot of people playing it both ways. That's why on Fridays in particular, we tend to see VXX a little busier as traders kind of position themselves to see what might happen at the end of the day. Yeah, it has a positive carry right now. So if you're looking for this thing to decay, you've gone to the wrong place, because it is not going to do that while our futures are sitting here in a backwardation form. In fact, every day it should theoretically actually go up a little bit. And that is why VXX is not doing anything you would want it to do. It's down a little bit right now as we're talking, but part of the reason why it's showing relative strength is because those futures are backward.
Yep, and that front portion of the curve is frothy. Not looking good for the ever-eroding products. Mr. Henry, you spent a lot of time watching VXX, and if so, what are your thoughts on days like today where we're seeing effectively the tail wagging the dog, VXX doing substantially more paper than the mothership VIX options, sir?
Well, I think a lot of people trade VXX, as just a short term, they want to jump into something, and I think they may be a little bit more comfortable with it than the VIX index options. But I think a lot of it comes from, what Mark is talking about. The backwardation changes the dynamics on it, right? Instead of the bleed, you have the product's actually accruing a little bit of value every day. And then you have, most people look at this and they know this doesn't usually last very long, right? We revert to some level of mean, and we kind of go back into a contango, which is, kind of the usual configuration. And so there's, people start to trade that, right? It's all a question of timing, right? It's pretty safe to say that the VIX index will be, under 20 sometime soon, but maybe not that soon. And, trying to timing is everything. So, I think that, it's funny because you're watching the crypto product suite start to grow with the ETFs and the futures and all of that. It reminds me of really actually reminds me of the SPX kind of complex, right? Where you have the index options and the futures and SPY and everybody trades those against each other, and you end up with this incredible pool of liquidity. The volatility products, it's the same thing, right? You have a community that's comfortable with all these products, and they trade them against each other. So I love to see heavy volume in the ETPs as well, because I kind of think that everything's got kind of its kind of specific use case, and it all feeds into everything else.
Let's see what's feeding into UVXY. Same deal, listeners. That curve gets frothy. You're not going to see a lot of downside in UVXY, and we got about 2 points to the upside this week. Coming into showtime, it was at about a 1780, probably a little bit higher right now. That puts it up about exactly 2 points. See, a little bit north of 18 right now. So yeah, a little over 2.2 points on the week. That ADV, same deal, ticking up to about 219,000. Puts it up about 35,000 from this time last week. And today, doing about 151,000 contracts. That's not bad. Nothing to sneeze at for a product like UVXY. I'll do a quick top 5 here, listeners, because the top 10 kind of gets small, and we're coming up against it here. Number 5, almost 10,000, 9,700 of the Feb 20s expiring next week on the 4th. Number 9, 10,600 of the Feb, also expiring on the 4th. 15 puts. Number 3, about 12,000, almost 11,800 of the June 20 puts. Number 2, about 12,000 of the Jan expiring today, 15 puts. And number 1, yet again, to the upside we go, 12,800 of the March 70 calls. By the way, same deal. It flipped in UVXY as well. But last week, it was all calls all the time, which some of you might be scratching your head at in a product like UVXY. This week, flipping the other way, 60-40 puts over calls this week. So we did see flips in both of them, but perhaps not exactly the way you might expect. In terms of the action out there today, about 8,300 of the Jan 18 halves leading the dance out there today, followed by 7,200 of the Jan 19s. Again, all this going the way of the dodo today. Number 3, 5,500 of the Jan 17 half puts. Number 4, 5,400 of the Feb 14 puts. And rounding out the top 5 today, we have the Jan 20 calls of 5,200. Mr. Flowmaster, same question for you, sir. I know you watch some of the eroding products probably out of the side of your eye throughout the course of the week. What are your thoughts on a product like UVXY? Same deal, not feeling the erosion that VXX had the same issue with as well, bumping up against that backwardation. What are your thoughts on some of the numbers we're seeing out here in UVXY this week, sir?
I mean, like I said, I think everybody, there's a lot of attempted arbs between all these different products with their, idiosyncrasies and, kind of differences, but it's all the same family. So when I look at, vol product volume, I look at it kind of across the board. And, you can kind of see what people, in some cases, what people are shooting for. And, the UVXY, same deal. It's healthy volume, just kind of a lot of action. And that's what makes the world go round.
Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. Anything catching your eye out there in UVXY in this insane, tumultuous week, sir?
Yeah, another one that has been kind of it's active, moving around a lot. Big bets on what it's going to do for expiration today. We're seeing pretty heavy volume on the 18s and 17.5s and on the 18.5s and 19 calls as well. So a lot of positioning for the last couple hours here today, and but no huge orders that have gone out there. When it starts to get a bid here, sometimes maybe if it gets another leg up, you'll start to see some people playing longer term puts or put spreads to try and get some mean reversion, but none of that coming into play quite yet. Vol's really high. The June vol's 200. So just remember that stuff. That ain't cheap, folks.
That's when all of our people start writing in saying, "How do I trade this thing? It's way too expensive." Well, yeah, 200 vol. It's gonna do that for you, listeners. Speaking of vol, let's get out some of the single name vol. We are starting to see some of that pop off as earnings season coming fast and furious. Listeners, just updated. They came in, of course, right after option block showtime. Yes, it's updated with the fresh, newly minted earnings move results, earnings season, and now earnings trades reports from our friends over there at ORATS. A lot of good names popping off this week, listeners. Of course, just yesterday we had a lot of living in one day. I mean, look at the names that popped off yesterday. MasterCard, Mickey D's, JetBlue, Dow Chemical, Southwest Airlines, Apple, Robinhood, and Visa. So you had quite the cross-section of the economy all reporting in one day. Today, Chevron and Caterpillar. We have the latest move results and season reports. I'll let you check those out for yourself. Some of my old friends like Intel and Dow popping off earlier this week. Tesla, obviously, making a big bang out there earlier this week. Coming out with decent numbers, but then spooking folks is not really giving a lot of guidance to the future. And what there was all about robots and everything else but making cars. So that seemed to spook a lot of people. Tesla's still hanging out well shy of the 1,000 level right now, 831. As we're coming towards the latter portion of the show here. Of course, from a season perspective, things are looking pretty interesting. Week one, as you might imagine, pretty robust. 108% coming in for week one. That's nearly 50 firms are reporting in week one. 48. Week two, 54 already. A little bit lighter in week two, 70% only. So we're averaging out still at a light season around 83%. Will that maintain, or will we, as we start seeing a lot more names popping off and including some more of the big tech names that you folks are watching, will those numbers change? We shall see. Right now, our average for the last 12 quarters, week one is 82%, so blowing the doors off there. Week two, averaging only 70%. Actually, averaging only 66%. Week two is the darkest, most dire week by far. And so far, we're exceeding that at 70%. So I suppose if you look at it from a glass half empty perspective, we're actually looking pretty good. I actually have some new earnings trades reports for you guys to check out. If you haven't checked this out yet, this is kind of the newest addition to those reports, and it's really cool stuff. Matt and his team kind of crunching the numbers and looking for long calendars, short calendars, which is not a trade a lot of people like to do, and then, of course, long and short straddles, and they give you the strikes, the expiration, everything that they're looking at, as well as their performance, the vol. So if you're looking for some idea generation, or maybe you just want to see some ways some trades play out during earnings season, these are definitely worth checking out. Looks like we have some new ones there in Hood, a calendar in Robinhood, Juniper, a whole bunch going up here this week. So a lot of new earnings trades popping off. I have a feeling Hood's going to be coming up a little bit later today on Options Oddities. So stay tuned for that, listener. Are you going to be buying calendars? I don't know about that. I know the Rock Lobster is a big fan of his 1x2 put spread. I got a feeling that one probably worked out. out there. Going out to what's coming up later on in the week. Of course, we have all the reports still up there for you later on this week. Google coming out on the 1st, PayPal, Starbucks, Facebook on the 2nd. Really quickly, let's get really quickly at good old Google. 2584 is where they were as of this report. They were pricing in $133.67. In the past, they moved $123, so a little bit extra juice in Google. Let's go out to coffee. Starbucks, 95.5. They're pricing in 4.25. In the past, they've moved $3.35, so extra juice afoot there as well. Facebook, who can argue with some extra juice there? A lot of irons in the fire, not all of them good for Facebook right now. They're on the 2nd after the bell. 294.5 is where they were trading as of this report. They're pricing in about $17.60. In the past, they've moved about 13.25, listeners. So a lot of extra juice out there in Facebook. Let's go Qualcomm really quickly as well. Another hot one with all the chip madness going on out there. They're on the 2nd after the bell. 167 even is where they were trading. They're pricing in 12.25. In the past, they moved about exactly $10. So a decent amount more juice, but perhaps not as much as you might have expected. Oh, really quick, one more. I lied. Amazon on the 3rd next week. 27.77.45. It's hard to say that with a straight face. 153.5 what they're pricing in. The past, they moved 107.67. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, I lied. One more after this. Ford. Ford, another name you folks can't stop trading out there these days. 1991 when they ran these numbers, they were pricing in about $1.50. In the past, they moved about 78 cents. So nearly 2x out there, which again, given what Ford's been up to over the past couple of months, it's kind of hard to fault them with that. But now it is time, listeners, into real quick volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, let's get out to it, folks. First, really quickly, we asked you guys some fun questions this week. When everything started popping off on Monday, VIX hovering at about a 38. We say, hey, you think this has legs or will it be just a momentary blip? Quite simply, what will we hit first this week, 30 or 40, or will we close somewhere in between on Friday? We all know the answer, so we shut the poll down after a couple of days because we knew the answer. We broke through the 30 handle. Now back again north of 40. You guys were leaning the other way, though. When we shut the poll down, it was at about 38% for 40, the 40 handle, and a tie for 31% each for the 30 handle, and also closing today between 30 and 40. So you guys were feeling more vol, but we got the dark side first. Also, you guys are still feeling your love for crypto. We ask you if this big just annihilation in the crypto markets over the past couple of months, has it caused you to perhaps change your outlook for the crypto markets of 2022? Whopping 52% of you saying no, about 18% saying yes, and about 30%, I should say, saying you don't trade crypto right now. Let's go on out to this one really quickly from our listeners. Bobby Tish. I like that. He says, do we know when the new XIV is going to launch? You seem to get these questions every now and then. This one, of course, the replacement for the much ballyhooed XIV that went the way of the dodo back. Seems like a lifetime ago now in Volmageddon of 2018. Wow, that was 4 years ago. That's crazy. That doesn't seem like, in some ways, it seemed like it was yesterday. Other days, it seems like many, many lifetimes ago. Mr. Meatball, I know you have your finger on the pulse of all things vol. Any updates for our listener here on the new XIV? And also, can you believe it's nearly 4 years since Volmageddon, sir?
No, I can't believe it's nearly 4 years, and I've not heard anything. So hopefully they'll come out with it sometime soon. Like Monday would be great, but no, haven't heard anything yet. But when that thing comes out, that'll be fun to trade.
If only we had someone here from SIBO who can give us the inside scoop. I'm just kidding. I won't put Henry in that hot seat. Instead, we'll keep on rolling. It is time to get a lot hotter, listeners. We have to save him for this. It is time for the most difficult, the most dangerous portion of the show. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, listeners, let's do it. And man, looks like fading your book may have worked out for you this one time, Mr. Meatball, because coming into the end of the show, we have spikes right now at about a 29.70. VIX cash a little bit shy of 29.5, about 29.40 or so. So that puts me out of the running. I was at a 26.75. I was feeling more vol, but obviously not quite as much vol as we're seeing right now. Nobody had a 30 handle for this past week. Dr. VIX, once the future and present Dr. VIX, had about a 24. He was feeling a lot less vol. But Mr. Meatball, I'll have to give you the closest. You're not, well, actually, if I'm charitable, you're still not there. You're about 0.3 away in spikes, but you're closest on spikes. You get the closest award for this week, sir, if not perhaps the winner. What say you, sir?
Yeah, no, I think 29.99 was a very good guess considering how much the VIX is moving around. When vol's this high, the bullseye needs to be a little wider.
We have discussed that. To our credit, we have not done that through the entirety of the pandemic. We have kept it at a 1/10 of a point. That makes it more impressive when you get a bullseye, sir, because then it really means something. If we widened it out to like a 1/3 of a point, or dare I say it, 1/2 a point, the folks wouldn't respect us at the end of the day, sir. We have maintained our 1/10 of a point bullseye come hell or high water and come hell or high vol. And so far, so you get the closest award, sir. So I will give you the choice. Do you want to go first? Or do you want to pick someone else to go first?
Oh, let's let Henry go first.
Oh, the Flow Master. He is thrust into the spotlight. All right, Mr. Flow Master. I know it's been a while. So first off, if you will so kindly regale us with your vol prognostication for this time next week. And then I'm going to give you an addendum. You have not had a chance to join us yet this year, so you have not had a chance to prognosticate for your VIX spikes closing level for the end of the year. So if you want to ruminate on that one, I can come back to you on that one, but I'm going to have you do both today, sir. So have at it in whatever order you want.
All right, so VIX next Friday at this time, I'm going to say 24.5.
24.5 for the Flow Master. And do you want to do end of the year yet? Or do you want to think about it a little bit? I kind of just threw it at you.
I'm going to say 19 end of the year. 19
even for the end of the year. Wow. The Flow Master says vol is coming in. Isn't that funny to say 19 is like, oh, vol crashing? But for frame of reference this week, it certainly feels like it. All right. End of the year for Henry. He gets an even 19. We have to start. I know we have them all collected somewhere. I want to start looking at all the vol prognostications for the end of the year. We have quite the gamut that we have predicted. Really quick, let's look at some of the listeners here, see if any of them were any closer than us. Looks like the highest we had of all the relevant ones that our producers put in here. Looks like Todd had almost a 27, 26.90. Alan had about a 26.25. Everybody else, Munster, a new one. I like seeing the new handles in there. Welcome, Munster. 25. Is that the cheese? Are you a fan of the Munsters? A little bit of both. Let's see. Those were the highest. Everybody else was substantially south. Oh, Luigi, 19.75. See, I didn't scum you, and B, well shy of where we are closing right now. So all you people who say I scum Luigi, I did not. And yeah, no love. Options Queen, our ongoing winner for quite some time, 23.25. So this was a rough week, kind of understandably so, but nonetheless, we have to soldier on. All right, for this coming week, we have a whole bunch coming up. Obviously, anything can pop off over the weekend. Anything can pop off any day. It's those kind of markets, listeners. So let's see, Flow Master was already at a 24.5. You know me, I don't like to crowd our guests for this time next week, but I'm going to feel a little bit more juice towards the end of the week. I'm going to go out there, listen, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say 27.65. So there we go, listeners. Already over a 3-point wide market. The Meatball can come in right between, or he can go somewhere crazy as he is wont to do. Mr. Meatball, sir, what are you feeling for this time next week?
So we got a 24.5. We got a 25.25.
No, 27.65. That's the accurate prediction.
27.65.
Yes.
All right. Well,
clearly, go ahead. I'll buy them all, baby.
I gotta say, 19.99.
Now, is this your fading your book again, or are you this your actual Meatball prognostication?
This is my actual Meatball prognostication.
All right.
I think we're gonna go 19.99.
All right, listeners, there's your vol market for this week. The Meatball at the low end, 19.99. Mr. Flow Master in the middle at a 24.5, feeling a 19 for the end of the year. And myself staying frothy, staying on the Ukrainian tip, 27.65. If you haven't done so, start getting your prognostications into the live chat. If you're listening after the fact, of course, hit us up. If you guys get in there, you get close. Maybe some fabulous prizes heading your way. All right, listeners, unfortunately, that's going to do it for this episode of Volatility Views. Man, how an hour flies by when you're talking vol, especially on a week like this. But before we go, Mr. Flowmaster, we were talking a lot of trade alert data on the show today. If folks are intrigued, they want to kick the tires for themselves, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
They can still go to trade-alert.com and you can sign yourself up. You can also send us an email, admin@trade-alert.com. And if you're interested in a trial, we're happy to kind of talk to people. One thing I wanted to slip in is one thing that's really interesting on the data side is I've been watching SPX and VIX volume in this. They used to open at 2 a.m. Now they open at 8 at night, New York time. And we've been seeing several thousand contracts a night printing in this overnight session. And then there's a curb session coming, I believe, in a week or two, which will basically go from 4:15 right till 5 o'clock. So this market is getting closer and closer to 24-hour trading. In fact, I listened to the Robinhood call last night, and they're talking about super extended hours or something that they want to roll out. So the data is getting bigger and bigger, and it's going to keep us busy.
There you go. Big data. Check it out for yourselves. TradeAlert.com. Great place to go to analyze and parse and scan and just play around with all this data out there. Speaking of things getting bigger, our chat going crazy with some upside vol prognostications. So they're feeling a lot more vol for this time next week, and they're usually a pretty savvy bunch. Let's go back out there to the Meatball, who's feeling a teen handle again. Mr. Meatball, if folks want to hit you up, check out all of the various courses and products and things you have to offer. Where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, go to optionpit.com. You know, I write a VIX-based blog every day, and you're going to want to read it because it's chock full of awesome ideas and ways to make money trading. Go to optionpit.com and read that VIX Edge blog.
There you go. Check out the VIX Edge blog. And you guys know where to go to learn more about all things spikes. MyAxOptions.com/spikes. While you're there, of course, check out historical data, releases, so all the new updates, talking about the futures and the new products on the options front and everything else. You want to see those first, MyAxOptions.com/spikes. Even a link to a cool show called Volatility Views. What more could you possibly ask for from a vol-oriented destination? We have to head on out of here, listeners, but don't worry if you're in the secret club. We are not done yet. We'll be back in a little less than an hour now to talk about all the mad, unusual activity that has unfolded over the course of this past week. I got a feeling it's going to be a jam-packed hour, so it should be fun. And otherwise, we'll see you back here next week, another episode of Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MyAx, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MyAx is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about spikes at MyAxOptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.